Hey guys, tonight we set out on the sleepy wander through the chill of the Andes, where the fog rolls in low and the air smells faintly of wet stone and something grassy, probably llama breath. You're trudging along an old mountain road, your footsteps muffled by moss and mist, and ahead of you looms a hairpin curve carved perfectly into the cliffside. You pause for a moment, staring down at the stones. They're smooth, even centuries later, and fitted so tightly together they might as well be pieces of a stone jigsaw puzzle glued by the gods. You blink once, slowly, and you swear just for a second that the pattern of the stones matches your own rhythm. This is where things get suspiciously specific. Legend. Well, mostly whispered jokes passed down by bored tour guides, and sleepy archaeologists claims that Inca engineers aligned their construction not just with the stars, or the mountains, or imperial orders, but with the blink rates of llamas. Yes, you heard that right. Not the moon, not the emperor's pulse. Llamas, animals known for their incredibly unbothered stares and tendency to lie down in the middle of trails when they're over it. Apparently, the average llama blinks about once every few seconds, slower when relaxed. And somehow, this became the cosmic metronome for an entire civilization's stone-laying rhythm, allegedly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the time where you're watching this. I love seeing where my sleepy little community is listening in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You descend the next few stone steps, noting how absurdly even they feel beneath your feet. Not in the annoying, modern pavement kind of way, but in the someone really cared about this kind of way. The stones aren't rectangular, not like Roman bricks or modern tiles. They're irregular, organic. Everyone fits into the next like puzzle pieces handcrafted by someone with a lifetime supply of patience and possibly a llama peering over their shoulder. Historians still argue whether Inca masons used pre-cut templates or carved each stone in place. Some say they shaped the next stone by rubbing it directly against the last one, over and over again, until it nested perfectly. Others claim they used molds, sun-heated tools, or even plant-based acids to soften the stone. Fringe theorists have suggested ultrasonic tuning forks or lost anti-gravity tech, which is adorable. Really. But none of those theories explain the blink rhythm. You stop again. This time, to watch a nearby llama munching stoically on some grass. Its eyes are half-lidded, dreamy. You lock gazes. It blinks. 1, 2, 3. Blink. You time your own blinking to match. And for some reason, you suddenly feel like you understand stone placement on a cellular level. It sounds ridiculous, but then again, so did the idea that Inca engineers designed roads across 24,000 miles of rough terrain without the wheel, without iron tools, and without written language, at least not in the traditional sense. Instead, they used quipu knotted strings to record everything from census data to possibly blink logs. Maybe, probably not. But would it really surprise you at this point? As you hike deeper into the fog, you notice how the trail remains incredibly smooth. Even as it weaves around boulders and cliffs, the Inca roads were not just built for people. They were built for communication, for runners, for llamas hauling cargo, for armies, for dreams of empire, and maybe, if you squint at the records hard enough, for the blink of a semi-sassy camelid. There's a strange beauty to it. You think about modern roads, cracked and potholed within years, asphalt baking in the sun. But here, the stones still rest snugly, like they've been waiting centuries for your sleepy footsteps. Even when the Spanish came and tried to reshape the land to fit their own grid systems, they often kept the Inca roads because surprised they were better. And so, every few steps, you blink again. You try to imagine yourself as an Inca road worker, chisel in hand, waiting for the llama beside you to blink before you make your next chip. Was it meditative, ceremonial, or just a very dry inside joke that got wildly out of hand? You crouch near a section of the path that curves slightly uphill. The stones there seem smaller, tighter. Legend has it that this section was overseen by a particularly high-strung llama named Tika, who blinked a bit too often, resulting in extra tight spacing. The project took an extra month to complete, Or so the story goes. Mainstream archaeology, for the record, says nothing about llama blinks. But some folklorists have gathered oral tales from highland communities suggesting that llamas were used to help maintain rhythm. Not unlike drummers setting pace in rowing teams. Not literal blink counting. Maybe, but something close. A biological rhythm in sync with the landscape, a breathing, blinking metronome. And you, wandering this ancient path in the dark, feel that rhythm seeping into your bones. Not fast, not jarring, just steady, soothing, unfazed. Like a llama squinting through mist, unimpressed, but deeply aligned with the earth beneath its hooves. You keep walking, the path curling downward now, and everything around you glistens with dampness. Moss carpets the edges of the trail like shaggy green icing. Water trickles lazily down grooves in the stone grooves, so shallow, so deliberate, that you realize they weren't caused by erosion. Someone carved them long ago, likely to guide rainwater and prevent slippage. You touch one with your fingertips. It's smoother than it has any right to be after 600 years of drizzle. The road here is built from andesite, a stone that's naturally tough and pretty miserable to work with unless you're an Inca mason, in which case it's just another Tuesday. These stones weren't laid in rows or grids, they were fitted together like melted cheese cooled into place, except, with no melting and about 1,000 times more effort. You reach a rest point, a flattish clearing where someone once stopped to tie a sandal or maybe check the direction of the wind. You sit there now, surrounded by boulders that frame the horizon like the lazy bones of some ancient skeletal god. And again, the blink theory taps you on the shoulder. Supposedly, according to one obscure journal entry by a Spanish friar whose handwriting was at best optimistically legible, the road builders often paused not just for rest, but for recalibration. They'd lay a few stones, then wait. Count, not seconds, not footsteps, but llama blinks. The friar found it amusing, but he also admitted the roads were most precisely done. His words, not ours. Historians still argue whether that friar misunderstood some form of timing ritual or whether he stumbled upon a deeply strange but functional method of aligning workflow with animal behavior. One camp insists the blink thing was symbolic, a way of invoking harmony with nature. Another camp thinks it was made up entirely to mess with colonists. As you sit on the damp stone, you watch the fog roll over the cliffs like wool being pulled across the sky. It's eerily quiet here, except for the occasional snort of a llama in the distance. Chewing something invisible and looking smug about it, you blink, once again unintentionally matching the pace of the beast. 1, 2, blink. This is where the term metric moss comes to mind. It's not a scientific term, definitely not, but a nickname used by a few landscape historians to describe how some stretches of Inca road are so uniformly moss-covered that you can actually measure the rhythm of the stonework by the way the moss grows along the seams. You're not sure if that's poetic or mildly disturbing. As your gaze follows the mossy lines, you notice how the stones curve gently around the hillside, never fighting it. They flow with the landscape, not through it. Inca engineers were allergic to straight lines. Instead, they curved their roads with the terrain, believing quite sensibly that nature probably knew what it was doing. Roads weren't just functional. They were respectful, practical, and, oddly enough, blink-paced. You imagine the original workers, dusty and sunburned, standing beside their stone piles, each one with a llama hitched nearby. Not for hauling, necessarily, sometimes just for company. One worker eyes the llama blinks. The worker sets his chisel. He strikes. Another blink. Another stone set. It's an oddly calming mental image. Makes modern deadlines seem hysterical by comparison. There's also this quirky tidbit. In some highland communities, oral tradition holds that if a mason worked too fast, faster than the llama could blink, they'd end up cursed with jagged stone fate, which roughly translates to chronic stubbed toes and misaligned doorways for life. That's the kind of superstition that only evolves when people take their stonework very, very seriously. You rise from your resting rock and start moving again, the stones beneath you never slipping, never groaning. The modern idea of perfect alignment usually involves lasers or spirit levels, but here, perfection was found through rhythm, through patience, through a soft, indifferent blink from an animal that will happily spit on you if provoked. Nature's very own site supervisor. It makes you wonder what other aspects of their engineering were influenced by living creatures. The road widths were designed for llama caravans. The resting stations were spaced just far enough apart that even a disgruntled llama could reach them without throwing a tantrum. And the drainage, supposedly inspired by llama foot patterns in the mud. Supposedly, mainstream scholars caution against reading too much into these stories. They urge restraint, but they also can't explain how the Inca road system remains more stable than most 21st century highways. Coincidence or blink-based brilliance. Your foot catches a smaller stone, a deliberate placement, it turns out, meant to slow traffic on a downward slope, like a prehistoric speed bump. You imagine a frustrated llama skidding slightly, blinking in indignation, and a foreman muttering, good enough. And so, you keep walking. The trail narrows again, curving along a cliff where the drop below disappears into clouds. The wind picks up, brushing cold across your cheeks, and a faint trail of llama prints dots the soft earth ahead. You match your steps to the prints. You blink. You don't count it, but you feel it. You're moving at the same pace the mountain intended, and maybe, just maybe, the pace a llama approved long ago. The mist thickens as you round the bend, wrapping around your arms like a damp scarf nobody asked for. Everything's muffled. Your footsteps, the soft huff of a llama somewhere uphill. Even the wind sounds like it's trying not to wake anyone. You trudge forward, stones still neatly underfoot, each one looking like it was placed by someone who had nowhere else to be and a deeply meditative relationship with volcanic rock. Ahead, you spot a narrow alcove partially roofed with overhanging stone, and you duck beneath it to rest. This isn't a modern rest stop with vending machines or tired signage. It's a whispering post. Not officially, of course, but that's what some archaeologists have nicknamed these tucked-away shelters scattered along the Capac Yan, the vast royal road system of the Inca. According to certain oral traditions, these stone hollows weren't just shelters. They were places where traveling quipu keepers paused to sort their strings and swap stories. The kind of gossip that didn't make it into official records. You imagine one now, sitting where you are, fingers fluttering through colorful knotted strings, muttering under his breath about how the blink alignment guys were slowing down progress by 2 stones a day. Historians still argue whether quipu were used purely for numbers or also for phonetic storytelling. The mainstream leans toward accounting corn rations, llama counts, population tallies, but others insist quipu tells stories, secrets, petty complaints, ritual instructions, possibly even sarcastic commentary about stonework trends. You close your eyes and listen, nothing. Then something faint, a low, repetitive whistle. Could be the wind, could be a ghostly engineer muttering. No. You place that one between blinks. You fool. This section of the road is particularly well preserved, with tight interlocking stones that ripple like reptile scales. There's no mortar here, just friction, precision, and what some claim was intuitive geometry passed down by master masons who could look at a pile of rubble and somehow see a staircase. Here's the quirky bit. There's a local legend from the Apurimac region about a stone cutter named Amaru who was so good at reading stones, people said he could hear them hum. He supposedly trained under a blind mason who insisted that every stone had a song and that you should never interrupt that song with a badly timed strike, especially not during a llama's blink. Amaru, it's said, could carve faster than anyone, but only if a llama was blinking nearby. Otherwise, he'd just sit there, waiting. You look around. The fog swirls low, brushing across the ground like a searching hand. It smells like rain and ash and mossy wood. Above, the cliff wall juts out in subtle angles, each notch likely deliberate, helping prevent water buildup, guiding runoff away from the trail. The Incas didn't just build on mountains, they built with them, folding the earth's quirks into their designs. You begin walking again, and your hand brushes the rock wall, smooth, cold, not polished, but shaped. The kind of stone that doesn't want to move, and somehow doesn't. Even in landslide zones, even in tremor country, the stones aren't locked by force but by form. a technique modern engineers still admire with mild irritation. As you follow the trail, you imagine the Quipu keepers, those unsung accountants of empire tugging their strings, nodding each beat of imperial rhythm. There's this theory, largely speculative, that certain fringe groups within the Inca administrative structure tracked non-numerical patterns, one set of knots for census data, another for corn yields, and a rarely used one for rhythm alignment. A theory surfaced in the 1980s suggesting that in some provinces, specialized runners were tasked with ensuring temporal coherence between teams of builders. What does that mean? No one knows, but a footnote in a translated colonial archive references a role called Tukui Chiriyuk, loosely. He who sees the blink. Most dismiss it as a mistranslation. Others aren't so sure. You picture a group of builders, mid-morning, their work slow and steady. A llama sits in the corner, eyes heavy-lidded. The foreman holds up a hand, not yet. Wait for the llama. Blink. Now tap. A chisel strike. Not superstition, just a rhythm. Not spiritual, just peaceful. And if that sounds absurd, remember, humans have used stranger things to keep time. In ancient Japan, incense clocks burned at set speeds. In medieval Europe, monks relied on candle clocks and dripping water, maybe in the Andes. With no need for candles or clocks, the soft blink of a furry coworker became the measure of trust. You stop at another whispering alcove, this one half collapsed, but still sheltering a small pile of gravel, maybe debris, maybe an abandoned attempt to fill a pothole. You sit again, feel the silence stretch, and imagine another traveler, centuries ago, resting in the same spot. He, too, probably blinked in sync with his llama, or at least tried to. From above comes a sudden snort. You look up. There it is again on a ridge above, a silhouette, long neck, pointy ears, chewing very slowly. You lock eyes. It blinks. 1, 2, blink. You nod. Message received. The road tightens again, slinking along a jagged cliff like it's afraid to take up too much space. Below, a long drop into clouded nothing. You keep your eyes on the trail, which is easier said than done when the wind keeps teasing your sleeves and occasionally flinging bits of your dignity into the abyss. Ahead, stretched across the ravine like a spider's dare, is a rope bridge. You pause. It doesn't look unsafe. Exactly. Just old. Ancient. Really. It's made of woven ichu grass, the same kind the Incas used to build suspension bridges that could last years if maintained. One of these, the Cuishuachaca Bridge, is still rebuilt annually by communities following centuries-old rituals, each strand twisted and knotted by hand. No steel, no screws, just trust in plant fiber and shared rhythm. You step forward and the bridge hums faintly beneath your feet. Not a creak, a hum, like it remembers footsteps. It sways just enough to remind you it's alive. And you grip the side ropes out of respect. Every few steps, you glance down not at the dizzying depths, but at the planks themselves. They're spaced with shocking regularity. Even now, like someone measured not in inches or feet, but in blinks. That theory pops up again in fringe literature, that plank spacing across Inca rope bridges was decided using llama blink intervals, 1 blink per step. Maybe a superstition to avoid missteps, or a way to help keep the crossing rhythmic and less terrifying. The logic: blink, step, masa, don't die. Repeat. Historians still argue whether the bridges were purely functional or also symbolic. Some say they represented links between worlds, earth and sky, people and gods. Others think the symmetry and design of these bridges reflect not just utility, but ritual precision and blink alignment, though mostly laughed off in polite academic circles, fits neatly into the ritual rhythm theory. As you continue across, the wind starts to whistle through the ropes, not a howling whistle, more like someone low-key annoyed with a flute. You imagine the builders, balancing on cliff edges, braiding these ropes, counting under their breath. 1 llama blink, 2 llama blinks, tie, 1 blink, knot, 2 blinks, pull tight. The absurdity of it makes you smile until you realize it's no less believable than the fact that these rope bridges held armies, runners, merchants, livestock, everything an empire needed to move. And here you are, some modern wanderer trying not to get vertigo while tracing ancient blink patterns. You make it across in one piece, which feels like a small victory. The path widens a bit, and you see remnants of a rest station Tambo. Once, this would have been a place for messengers to sleep, store goods, or swap llamas. Now, it's just a stone platform covered in soft dirt and wind-blown feathers. A few carved stones peek out from under the debris. Some still fit together perfectly. Some look off as if a llama blinked at the wrong time and everything shifted by a fraction of a breath. There's a story from the small Quechua village about a builder named Olco who swore by the blink method. He claimed it kept his stones in harmony with the quiet rhythm of the world. Apparently, he once stopped an entire project for 4 days because his llama had conjunctivitis and kept blinking too fast. When the foreman complained, Olco just shrugged and said, "We follow the beat, not the budget." Quirky, yes, but you can't help noticing how quiet your steps have become. The road absorbs your weight. The stones accept your stride. Even here, miles into the mountains, the craftsmanship holds. You start to think about tempo in other ways. In music, tempo guides emotion. In heartbeats, it signals health or fear. And maybe, in Inca engineering, rhythm guided safety, structure, and spiritual coherence. Whether the builders counted heartbeats, drum beats, or yes, even llama blinks, the point is, there was a rhythm, not rushed, not chaotic, something that belonged to the earth. You reach a small rise, and from there, you can see another stretch of road sloping downward. The stones are tighter again, smaller, possibly the work of a team with a particularly lazy-eyed llama. You think back to a quote often misattributed to a Spanish chronicler. In the Andes, nothing is rushed except the rivers. And even those, the Incas guided with terraces and aqueducts, controlling the wild with geometry and patience. You pause to catch your breath, not because you're tired, but because the view deserves it. Across the valley, more terraces cling to the mountainside like lines in a forgotten book. Somewhere down there, someone once blinked, laid a stone, and made the path you're standing on. Above, a cloud rolls past, casting a moving shadow over the cliffs. The bridge sways gently in the distance, and a quiet blink, somewhere behind you, feels like punctuation at the Yuatsin a long, quiet sentence. The sun peeks through for a moment, catching on the edge of a distant glacier and scattering light across the peaks like someone spilled powdered sugar onto the Andes. You squint. Everything sparkles. The road veers left, hugging a hillside where the terrain evens out a little. It's here you see the remains of an old quarry. It's not much a few worn chisel marks, a partially cleaved boulder, and a low retaining wall that probably once kept eager llamas from wandering off mid-excavation. You approach slowly. The ground crunches underfoot, gritty with centuries of stone dust and frost. The sun is warm on your back now, and the air smells faintly metallic, like the inside of an old tool shed. This is where the story of Cory, the stonemason who counted blinks, supposedly begins. According to regional lore, Cory was famous not for his speed, but for his uncanny sense of alignment. His stones always fit, always with no gaps, no grinding, no readjustments. While others chipped and hauled and muttered about deadlines, Cory would sit for long stretches of time beside his llama, Sumac, staring at the uncut boulder in front of him like it owed him money. And then, right after the llama blinked, he'd raise his chisel, strike once, and nod like he'd just solved a crossword puzzle. You crouch near one of the half-cut stones. It's oddly smooth in places, rough in others, almost like someone was in the middle of coaxing it into shape and then stopped. Maybe a sudden storm, or maybe the llama blinked twice too fast, and Cory took it as a divine veto. Historians still argue whether the Incas used pounding stones or bronze tools to shape their quarries. Bronze is too soft. Most agree. But pounding stones leave too many uneven marks. Some suggest the Incas had methods we've simply lost: secret polishing techniques, repetitive rubbing, or using fine sand and water to wear down surfaces gradually. It would take forever, but they had time. And llamas, and a weirdly satisfying sense of pace. You imagine Cory standing there, waiting, chisel held gently in one hand, the other resting on Sumac's fuzzy flank. Blink, tap, blink, scrape. There's even a minor myth that Sumac could sense the quality of a stone just by sitting near it and chewing in a certain pattern. A kind of four-legged quality control officer with thick eyelashes, and an attitude. Fringe theorists adore this story. Some even insist Corey developed an entire stone-cutting calendar based on Sumaic's moods. If the llama blinked to the left, the stone was weak. If it blinked while chewing, it was blessed by the mountain. If it stared without blinking for too long, time to take a nap and try again tomorrow. You rise and run your fingers along one of the boulders. There are faint scratch marks here, possibly the ghost trails of tool work. Or maybe just wind and time pretending they were engineers too. Above, you notice how the hill has been subtly shaved to allow for an easier descent. This was no random sight. The Incas weren't just picking the nearest pile of rocks, they were selecting places based on grain, fracture lines, and sometimes, supposedly, the personality of the stone. That's not entirely poetic exaggerations. By the way, there's real evidence suggesting the Incas believed in Waka's sacred energies housed in rocks, trees, springs, even oddly shaped boulders. So cutting stone wasn't just a task, it was a negotiation. And having a llama blinking approvingly beside you probably helped the vibes. You wander farther into the quarry and find a sunken pit where smaller stones have been abandoned mid-cut. Some of them look strangely polished, like someone was halfway through shaping a wall before they just gave up and walked away. Or maybe they blinked at the wrong time. Nearby, you spot a carved groove in the cliff face, a sort of chute, likely used to guide stones down the slope. It's worn smooth now, like an old water slide. You sit at its edge and imagine Corey watching his finished blocks slide away, Sumac standing proudly beside him, as if to say, "You're welcome." There's even a story from the region about a day when Sumac refused to blink at all. Not once. Not for hours. Corey, superstitious and stubborn, refused to touch a tool until she did. The entire work crew sat idle. Foreman raged. Deadlines slipped. Then, just before sunset, the llama blinked once, slow and deliberate. Corey struck the stone, and when they moved it 2 weeks later, it slid perfectly into a temple wall without a single adjustment. Coincidence? Probably, but satisfying? Absolutely. The sun disappears again behind a passing cloud, casting long shadows across the quarry floor. You stand, brush dust off your knees, and take one last look at the scattered stones. Every one of them a maybe, a might have been. Tools long gone. Masons long forgotten, but the path their hands shaped still guides feet like yours. And somewhere in that slow rhythm, in the pause between breaths, in the space between blinks, you feel a quiet kind of brilliance that didn't need blueprints or batteries. Just a good eye, a steady hand, and one deeply unimpressed llama. Back on the path, the terrain evens out for a while, giving your knees a break. The stones here are smaller, more uniform, forming a smooth ribbon across a gently sloping valley floor. You pass through a narrow stone arch, likely a checkpoint, or pucara. Once guarded by stern-eyed officials and slightly less enthusiastic llamas, there's no one here now. Of course, just wind and grass, and the whisper of footsteps long vanished. This is where the empire flexed its paperwork muscles. The Inca state, despite lacking wheels, money, or writing in the conventional sense, ran one of the most efficiently organized societies in the pre-industrial world. Roads like this one weren't built randomly. They connected provinces, supply centers, temples, and strategic lookouts. Every so often, you'd pass one of these checkpoints, where state officials recorded who was traveling, why, and with what cargo, and how did they do it. With Kwaipu, of course, those bundles of knotted strings that look like festive spaghetti but actually stored astonishingly complex data. Knots, colors, spacing, it all mattered. You step into the shadow of the archway and imagine standing before one of those officials. Behind him, a llama blinks slowly. The official squints at your sandals. The llama blinks again. A knot is tied. Historians still argue whether these officials standardized measurements between provinces. Some say everything was based on the UQ, a unit roughly equivalent to the span of a man's forearm. Others insist that body parts were used only as rough guides, and that central record keepers used stone rods and solar shadows to recalibrate regularly. And somewhere in the middle of all that math are the llamas. You see, there's this peculiar theory mentioned in exactly one translated footnote, and largely dismissed by modern scholars that suggests blink rates might have played a role in calibrating distance. Specifically, that some checkpoint workers would use the average blink rate of a llama to pace time between station duties, a kind of living metronome. Not official, not mandatory, just tradition. Or superstition, or boredom. You laugh under your breath, and then consider how, honestly, it's not that far-fetched. In a society where runners called chasquai sprinted between posts carrying messages encoded in knots, rhythm was everything. The entire system depended on precision, relay timing, rest stops, dietary planning. There's even archaeological evidence of standardized meal packs for messengers, maize cakes, dried meat, and coca leaves for stamina. You imagine a relay runner arriving at a checkpoint, panting, extending a quipu. A scribe scans the knots. A llama blinks. Time logged. You step into a small plaza flat, circular, ringed by low walls that might have once held storage buildings. In the center is a worn slab of stone, almost like a stage. Some believe this was a resting post for chaskis. Others think it might have been a checkpoint for tax assessments. Locals, however, tell a more whimsical tale that this plaza was where llama judges were kept specially trained animals that, depending on how they blinked at a visitor, indicated whether that person was honest, shady, or in desperate need of a bath. A joke, probably, or maybe a metaphor, but still. You look at the slab and picture a lineup of sleepy llamas squinting at travelers, tails flicking like lie detectors. You sit on the edge of the slab. The stone is cool, flecked with tiny mica crystals that catch the light. You think about how this road system was mapped and maintained, without satellite views or digital records. Instead, the Incas relied on observation, astronomy, and according to a few off-the-beaten-track scholars, rhythmic natural cycles, some of which, yes, included blink patterns. There's a rare manuscript tucked away in a Spanish archive that mentions a blink reader stationed at a royal checkpoint. The description is vague, possibly a joke, possibly a misunderstanding of some larger ritual, but the image sticks. A person sitting beside a llama, noting down every blink while travelers passed by. What exactly they were measuring is lost to time, but the visual is priceless. It's at this point in your journey that you begin to feel it, not just the stone beneath your feet, but the rhythm within it. The road wants you to walk a certain way, not rushed, not dragging, just steady. You unconsciously begin matching your steps to that internal pulse. You blink. Your foot lifts. You blink again. The stone accepts you. Some modern engineers marvel at the durability of these roads built without mortar, holding tight through earthquakes. One theory suggests that the varied stone sizes and interlocking shapes allowed the road to breathe, flexing slightly during tremors. But the more poetic theory, that the roads weren't just built, they were listened to, that every placement, every groove followed a natural rhythm, one that just happened to mirror a llama's gentle blink. The sun emerges again, just briefly, gilding the mountaintops. You rise, stretch, and head toward the next bend. The air smells like warm dust now, and the sound of wind through grass is soft and steady. You think of Cory, of sumac, of checkpoint officials tying knots and nodding along to nature's tempo. And as you walk, you blink. The world blinks back. The road narrows again, curling upward into a higher elevation where the air is thinner and each breath feels like it's been filtered through stone. You keep walking, slower now, not from fatigue, but from awe. The stones here are different, lighter in color, rougher around the edges. And as the clouds pull back just enough, a jagged silhouette comes into view ahead, part ruin, part shrine. You've arrived at what remains of a sun temple. The site is half collapsed, but its grandeur lingers like the smell of incense on old fabric. You step inside what must have once been a ceremonial courtyard. The ground is lined with flat, carefully chosen stones, and to your right stands a series of upright slabs casting long, crooked shadows across the space. It's quiet here, almost reverent, the kind of place where even a llama might hesitate before stepping forward. Some archaeologists believe these temples were aligned with solar paths, solstices, equinoxes, and other cosmic milestones. They weren't just spiritual centers, they were astronomical observatories. You look up, The sky is a wash of pale gray blue, but you can imagine how, on the right day, a shaft of light would pierce through a narrow slit in the wall and strike one of those slabs dead center. Precision masquerading as magic. Historians still argue whether these alignments were intentional or coincidental, if the Incas were sophisticated astronomers or simply observant builders who got lucky with the sun. But here's where things take a left turn. One 17th century Jesuit account describes a priest witnessing a ceremony of stone placing where shadows were used to guide the layout, and somewhere in the same breath, he mentions the blinks of beasts being counted as omens. It's a blink and you'll miss it detail, pun fully intended, but it adds a strange twist to the solar alignment conversation. You step deeper into the ruin and notice something odd. The angles of certain wall segments don't match what modern geometry might expect. They tilt slightly inward, not just for stability, but possibly to interact with the shifting light or the shifting gaze of something else. Fringe theories love this stuff. 1. Charmingly nicknamed the llama lens theory, proposes that the long-lashed eyes of llamas were used as primitive prisms, reflecting or refracting sunlight in subtle ways to help builders determine light angles before making permanent cuts in stone. Totally unproven, of course, but oddly poetic. You rest against a stone ledge near the back wall, where faded carvings, possibly of animals, possibly just stylized clouds, curve along the edges. Some believe these weren't just decorative, but instructional, that apprentices learned to build by mimicking the forms carved into temple walls. One local legend claims that the curls in these carvings represented the correct flow of placement, while the blink of a llama nearby signaled when to stop and step back. You blink involuntarily, and for a moment you feel like the stones blink with you. There's also a theory lightly mocked in academic circles, but secretly beloved by museum docents, that suggests shadows cast by llamas standing near temples were used to gauge construction progress. If the shadow touches the altar before the animal blinks, one anonymous source wrote, "You are behind schedule." No one can trace the quote, but no one wants to disprove it either. You walk to the edge of the courtyard where the view stretches wide over terraced fields long abandoned. The curves of the land look sculpted, as if the earth itself had once blinked and softened into these shapes. Far below, a distant line of stones follows the mountain's hip, bending and straightening with subtle grace. That's the road you came from, and that's when it hits you every bend. Every adjustment in the path was probably made with far more intent than it seemed. You begin to notice it more clearly now. The placement of stones here isn't just structural, it's expressive. Certain walls feel restful, others tense. It's like the builders infused a mood into the architecture, maybe guided by instinct, maybe by light, or maybe by the rhythmic flutter of a llama's eyelid in highland breeze. You sit once more, back resting against a sun-warmed stone, and let your eyes wander. The longer you stare, the more you feel it, the pulse of it all. These aren't just ruins. They're monuments to observation, to patience, to tuning into the slow beat of the world and letting that dictate when, where, and how you work. So you sit, you blink, the clouds pass, and the shadows shift by a fraction, somewhere out there. In the folds of forgotten valleys, the blink of a llama may have once signaled the beginning of a stone's journey from raw mountain flesh to sacred wall. Whether or not you believe it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the story slows you down, makes you look, makes you notice, and in a world of blinking screens and flashing distractions, that feels like a miracle. You leave the temple slowly, retracing your steps back down the gently sloping trail. The light is softer now, less direct. That sleepy, golden hour when even the mountains seem to exhale. The wind carries the scent of something dry and mineral, like sun-baked stone after a rain that never came. You breathe it in. It's oddly calming, like the trail itself is telling you to settle in and let your thoughts unspool. The stones beneath your feet shift in tone again. These are smoother, paler, and so tightly fit that you can't wedge a fingernail between them. You pause, kneel, and run your hand along a seam between two of the larger blocks. There's no mortar here, just a stubborn refusal to shift, even after centuries of earthquakes, landslides, and llamas with questionable balance. Modern engineers have studied these joints with deep suspicion. How did the Inca masons achieve such precision with no iron tools, no diamond cutters, no laser levels? Some suggest hours of trial and error. Others propose the stones were rubbed together until their shapes matched, like slow-motion sandpaper sculptures. Then there's the softening stone theory, less academic, more mystical, which posits that Inca masons used plant extracts to temporarily soften rock surfaces before shaping them. And then, slipping in through the side door of all this speculation, comes the llama blink alignment theory again. According to a rather obscure 19th century field journal written by a German botanist with a fondness for dramatic phrasing, the Inca builders were known to pause after each placement, consulting with their beasts as though timing were divine. He doesn't clarify what consulting meant, possibly staring contests, possibly carrot-based negotiations. But what he hints at is more intriguing, that each stone's final adjustment was not just about fit, but about feel, about rhythm. And once again, llama blinks were said to punctuate that rhythm. You stand and look around. The trail here crosses a fault line, marked by a subtle shift in the terrain. It's here that you notice something subtle but astonishing. The larger stones are interlocked like puzzle pieces, each one carved with a series of notches and nubs that prevent shifting even during seismic events. This is what modern geologists call ashlar polygonal masonry, an architecture so precise, even tectonic tantrums can't unseat it. Historians still argue whether this was an intentional response to seismic activity or just a happy byproduct of a building style obsessed with fit. Some even speculate that Inca masons tested stone tension by sound tapping each one gently and listening for tonal harmony. Combine that with the idea of rhythmic timing, and suddenly, you're no longer looking at brute force construction, you're looking at something closer to choreography. And in this dance, the llama is still blinking in the wings. You remember a tale told in the Cusco highlands about a building crew who once worked beside a lake. The water's reflection made their llamas unusually calm. The team took it as a sign. They mirrored the llama's blink rates in their chisel timing. The result? The smoothest wall in the entire province, so smooth. Locals claim birds slide off it when they try to land. Is it true? Probably not. Is it beautiful? Definitely. You descend slightly, the path leveling again, and find yourself standing at a viewpoint overlooking a village below. From here, you can see rooftops, terraces, and a stone-lined path winding through it all like a silver thread. The stones down there, some laid recently, some ancient, don't match the perfection beneath your feet. But they try. They echo it. You realize that the real miracle wasn't just the road's durability, but its replicability. Communities kept building in the Inca style for generations because it worked. It lasted, and it made walking feel like floating. You continue along the trail, and your thoughts drift to cities where pavement cracks 6 months after pouring, to parking lots that puddle in 5 languages. And yet, here on a stone road placed before Shakespeare was born, you still trust every step. Why? Because someone cared. Someone stood where you're standing, waited for a llama to blink, and thought, yes, now's the time. And here's another oddity. In some regions, local oral tradition describes masons using their peripheral vision to watch for llama blinks while shaping stone. The logic: if you were focused directly on your work, you might miss the natural cue to pause. But if you trusted your side eye, the blink would arrive when you least expected it. That moment of relaxation, that sacred, unscripted beat. So maybe that's what made these walls so strong, not the tools, not the muscle, but the restraint, knowing when not to strike, when to stop, wait, breathe, blink. You reach a particularly elegant stretch of wall where the stones interlock with such finesse, they resemble melted wax hardened mid-drip. Some are massive, taller than you. Others fit like tiny teeth between the cracks. You imagine a mason placing the final stone, standing back and nodding. Not because the work was done, but because it was right. The wind picks up again, whispering through dry grass. You blink slowly, and something inside the wall seems to mirror it, not literally, of course, but the rhythm's there, embedded, remembered. And as you move on, you begin to suspect that this whole path, this whole system of roads and stones and shrines, isn't just a marvel of engineering, It's a lullaby. You descend toward a valley now, where the landscape opens wide like a sigh. Gone are the tight stone corridors and steep cliffs. Ahead lie shimmering salt flats, patches of brilliant white that catch the sun like mirrors, casting fractured light in every direction. You wince slightly at the brightness and slow your pace, not just for caution, but to drink in the surreal beauty. This is Mara's territory, where salt has been harvested from terraced pools since before the Spanish had finished arguing about what shoes to wear to conquest. The pools cascade down the hillside in hundreds of tiny rectangles, each one glistening with pale pink saltwater evaporating under the high-altitude sun. Llamas still roam the edges of the terraces today, blinking lazily in the glare like they own the place, which, historically speaking, they kind of did. You wander closer, stepping off the main path to follow a smaller trail that winds through the salt pans. The light is intense here, bouncing up from every surface. You blink frequently, and it's not long before you start to wonder, was that always part of the plan? According to one fringe hypothesis, again, mostly confined to obscure local interviews and the occasional footnote in anthropological dissertations, Inca engineers intentionally brought llamas to these highly reflective areas during road construction and alignment. Why? Because the glare made the animals blink more predictably, giving the builders a consistent rhythm to work with. It sounds absurd, like building your life around the sneeze patterns of a goose, and yet, the theory has a strange internal logic. In a culture so deeply in tune with nature's rhythms, sunlight, shadow, altitude, water flow, why wouldn't animal behavior be folded in? 2. Historians still argue whether the Incas deliberately aligned road segments with light reflection angles. Some believe the salt flat served as calibration zones, helping engineers test shadow lines, stone temperature, or material fatigue. Others dismiss that as pseudo-historical mysticism, claiming the salt was purely economic mined, traded, taxed. But even in official records, the location of the Mara salt flats plays an unusually prominent role. Why here? Why so precise? You kneel beside one of the salt pools and peer in. The surface is perfectly still, like a pane of glass. Your reflection stares back, blinking. Beside you, the distorted outline of a stone wall runs parallel to the trail, its shadow rippling in the water. You start to see the connection: light, reflection, blink, placement. There's a local legend that claims the most skilled masons could judge the flatness of a stone not by running their hands across it, but by placing it near one of these salt pools and watching the reflection. If the line of the stone shimmered too much, it wasn't ready. If it held still even in water, it was perfect. Bonus points. If a llama blinked nearby as confirmation, you hear a low grunt and turn your head. Just uphill, half shielded by a wall of stacked stone, a llama watches you with mild judgment. It blinks. Once, you nod, involuntarily. Approval granted. As you stand and walk on, the trail weaves through more of these salt structures. The walls here are shorter, thinner, designed to hold brine rather than armies. And yet the precision remains. Every stone fits, even the ones laid underwater. You reach a junction in the path, a narrow bridge of stone that cuts directly across two pools. The stones beneath your feet are small, square, and laid in a pattern so hypnotically precise it feels musical. You take one step, then another, and suddenly your walking matches your blinking. Blink, step, blink, step. You don't mean to, but it happens. Like you've accidentally tuned into an old rhythm that's still echoing in the salt. There's a rumor, half folklore, half oral tradition, that in ancient times, builders would sit at dusk beside the salt pools and count the blinks of llamas reflected in the water. Some said it was for luck. Others said it was a way to mark time without the sun, a biological sundial, calibrated through eyelashes and stillness. And then there are those who insist it was just a way to keep the youngest workers focused. Watch the llama. Count the blinks. Now, hand me that chisel. You reach the far edge of the salt flats, where the road rejoins the main trail and begins to rise again. You pause for one last look. The pools shimmer like broken mirrors, some already turning crusty with pink salt deposits. In the distance, a group of llamas rests in the shade of a wall, chewing slowly. One stands, stretches, and blinks twice before sitting back down. Coincidence? Probably, but by now, you're not betting against anything. The sun is dipping low, casting long horizontal shadows across the path. You feel the rhythm in your steps again, not forced, not rehearsed, just there natural, effortless. It's the rhythm of blinking and walking, of sun and stone, of old stories whispered across centuries. You blink one last time, watching the light catch the salt one final time, and you keep walking. The road rises again, curling up the flank of another hill like a ribbon left behind by a distracted giant. The salt flats shrink behind you, now just scattered glints on the valley floor, and the air grows thinner once more. With every step, you notice the terrain change beneath your feet. The stones feel slightly larger, slightly rougher, like they were meant to hold not only your weight, but the beat of many, many hooves. This stretch of the trail, old maps suggest, was part of the Chasqui relay route. Those legendary Inca runners who ferried messages, goods, and even fresh fish to the emperor, hundreds of miles inland. You walk slowly now, but you can almost hear the phantom sound of sandals thudding across these stones, each one landing with practiced precision, and not just human feet. Alongside those runners came caravans of llamas, plodding in their slow, stubborn way, hauling cargo and food and cloths, each step measured not in urgency but in steady inevitability. There's something comforting in their pace, as though the llamas knew something the runners didn't, that the empire would wait, that the mountain wouldn't move, that blink by blink, the road would always lead somewhere. You pass a low stone wall, half buried in dirt and lichen. It probably marked a boundary once territorial, spiritual, or just functional. Beside it, a sunken section of trail dips into a natural groove, and you realize it's not just shaped by erosion. The path has been deliberately worn, sculpted, smoothed into a slow descent meant for feet, hoofed or otherwise. Here's the fun bit. In a study that almost didn't get published because no one believed the premise, a small team of researchers tracked llama walking patterns across various Inca trails and noticed a strange correlation. The distance between certain stones along portions of the route matched the average pacing intervals of llamas more closely than those of humans. Coincidence? Sure. But when llamas blink at a nearly constant rhythm and step to that same internal metronome, maybe it's not such a stretch to think the trail was made to match. Historians still argue whether the Chasqui runners synchronized their stride with the terrain or if the terrain was built to guide their rhythm. Some oral histories claim that before a major road section was approved, a test run would be done literally with a llama. If the animal stumbled or hesitated too often, the design was reconsidered. You imagine that first test run now, a Highland official, decked out in feathers and frustration, watching a shaggy brown llama make its way down a newly built slope. Blink, step, ha ha, blink, pause. If the llama turned around and refused to move, the project was scrapped. If it blinked and plodded forward, trail approved. Absurd. Maybe, but only if you ignore every other example in history where animals dictated the flow of human design. Cities built around ox routes, cathedrals adjusted to avoid beehives, entire villages that reshaped layouts to avoid disturbing sacred nesting birds. Why not roads calibrated to camelid eye flutters? You crest a small hill and find yourself at an overlook. Below is a bend in the trail that curves so gently, so perfectly with the slope, it looks like the mountain itself requested it. There's a stone platform here, just a few flat blocks surrounded by wild grasses, but it radiates purpose. This was likely a rest station for runners, a place to swap messages, to breathe, to wait for the next blink. There's a legend about a runner who refused to rest, who ignored the pacing, who tried to outpace the empire's rhythm. His sandals wore down, his cargo tumbled, his llama, wise and unhurried, caught up to him 3 days later carrying everything he'd dropped. Moral of the story: don't sprint when a blink will do. You sit at the platform's edge and watch a few real llamas down in the valley. They move slowly, deliberately. One raises its head, locks eyes with you, and blinks. You blink back, half smiling. Then you rise and begin descending once more, feeling the stones beneath your feet sink with something inside you. Not your pulse, not your breath, but something older, something steadier, a rhythm of the road. A few more steps and you find yourself walking in near perfect time with your own blinks. Step by blink, Step afare. Pause. Blink. It's weirdly satisfying, like chewing in time with music, like clapping along to an old folk tune without needing to know the words. Modern hikers sometimes note this strange phenomenon that walking on these trails seems to slow the body down, that the road teaches you how to move again. Some call it meditative, others blame the altitude. But maybe it's just that you're stepping into someone else's rhythm. Someone who blinked slowly, stepped carefully, and laid each stone like it was the start of a sentence. You descend toward another junction where the trail splits, one path continuing uphill, the other veering toward the terraces. You pause, unsure which way you'll take. It doesn't really matter. Both were placed by the same hands. Both carry the same quiet beat. And somewhere, in the back of your mind, a slow eyelid flutters closed over a patient llama eye. The path winds now through a narrower ravine, lined with ancient terraces that climb the hillside like oversized stairs. Their stone walls are meticulously arranged, each terrace a patchwork of crops that once fed an empire and now host the occasional brave shrub or indignant guinea pig. You follow the trail between them, noting how the air feels different here, warmer, maybe denser, like the mountains are leaning in to listen. It's in this tucked-away stretch of road that one of the more peculiar Inca construction tales begins the infamous story of the ceremonial guinea pig that delayed an entire road project for 3 weeks. Yes, you heard that correctly. According to a persistent legend from the Chinchero region, road crews working on a particularly rocky pass brought with them not just llamas for pacing and hauling, but a single, well-fed guinea pig named Kusi. This rodent, revered for reasons no one can fully explain, was said to possess uncanny intuition for knowing when a stretch of road was improperly aligned. The method: set the guinea pig at the start of the path. If it blinked before the second stone, the builders had to start over. You chuckle, naturally, but then you notice the stones beneath your feet again aligned, clean, precise. And you remember that in many Andean traditions, guinea pigs, kui weren't just food. They were spiritual instruments, used in healing, fortune-telling, even construction blessings. If a kui twitched its nose too fast during a building ceremony, work halted until someone consulted the elders. Historians still argue whether this specific guinea pig tale is satire, metaphor, or just a long-running local joke. But it echoes a broader truth. The Incas didn't separate engineering from spirituality. Every stone, every shadow, every flick of an animal's eyelid mattered. Even the smallest blink could carry weight. You reach a flattened area where the trail widens into a circular platform, likely a small ceremonial site. You sit on one of the low walls, now smothered in moss. And imagine the construction team standing here centuries ago, a llama tethered to a rock, blinking slowly. Kusi the guinea pig perched nearby, nibbling a bit of coca leaf and staring into the middle distance like a tiny, judgmental oracle. There's a report from a Spanish chronicler, half bemused, half exasperated, who wrote that some natives delay their labor to observe the rodent's mood, saying they fear laying crooked stones. It's unclear whether he was mocking or just tired of trying to make sense of it all. Either way, the moment captures a fascinating fusion of superstition and science. You rise and continue walking. The stones ahead look even more intricate now, with tiny filler pieces wedged between larger slabs likely to absorb shock and prevent shifting. And yet, even here, someone once stood over each gap, considering, hesitating, maybe even waiting for a twitch from a nearby creature before committing. You begin to see the logic. When time isn't your enemy, when labor is sacred and material is precious, you don't rush, you don't force, you observe. You wait, whether for the sun to reach the right angle, for the wind to settle, or for a tiny animal to blink. You pass a stone outcropping where the road bends sharply. Set into the cliffside is a small niche, maybe a shrine, maybe a storage spot. Locals call these huacas, and many are thought to house spirits or ancestral energies. Some contain offerings, feathers, polished stones, bits of cloth. One tradition claims that guinea pig fur was occasionally left here as a blessing, either to bring good fortune or to appease a particularly picky deity of alignment. It's tempting to think of all this as charming folklore, but the roads are still here. The walls are still standing. The empire fell, but its stones remain. And every strange ritual, every blink, every rodent consultation, every pause for natural rhythm may have played a role in that endurance. You keep walking. Around you, the terraces narrow and climb higher. The road hugs the curve of the slope like it was grown there. You pass another platform, this one larger, perhaps a meeting place or a construction base camp. You imagine a heated debate unfolding between two supervisors, one insisting the next stone must be placed immediately, the other shaking his head, pointing at a nearby guinea pig that has, for the moment, closed both eyes. Nope, he says, not today. Kusi says, wait. You smile as the trail levels out once more, leading you into a small grove of quennual trees with their gnarled white bark and papery leaves. The wind rustles through the branches, and somewhere in the underbrush, something small squeaks. You pause, just for a moment, and though there's no guinea pig in sight, no llama close enough to blink meaningfully, you feel the pause settle over you like a blanket. A breath, a beat, a blink. Then you step forward slowly, quietly, like you've been given permission. You climb again, higher now, where the trees thin out, and the wind whistles sharp and clear through tufts of dry grass. The light has changed paler. Somehow, like the sky's been gently bleached by the altitude. It makes everything look just a little surreal, like you've walked into a faded painting of a place you almost remember. The trail here is narrower, carved directly into the mountainside. The drop-off to your left too steep to think about for long. But you trust the stones underfoot. By now, you've learned that they rarely let you down. You round a bend, and the world opens wide. Far above you, ridge lines jog across the sky, and straight ahead, built right into the mountainside like an observatory lost in time, is a wall of stone with a single narrow slit. This, they say, was a celestial watch point. Not officially a temple, not a checkpoint, just a quiet place where the stars were observed. The sun traced, and according to one particularly enthusiastic guide, you could hear the mountain breathing. If you sat still enough, you climbed toward it, the wind pushing back against you with a kind of gentle urgency, like it's making sure you really want to go. You do. The slit in the wall is just wide enough to let an array of starlight or moonlight at a precise moment of the year solstice, perhaps, or equinox. Many cultures built these kinds of markers, celestial clocks tied to planting, harvest, and ritual. But here, high in the Andes, where clouds often make stargazing a game of chance, you wonder, was the sky the only thing they were watching? Historians still argue whether this particular site had a calendrical function or was merely symbolic. Some claim the alignment was meant to frame a constellation sacred to the Inca, the llama in the sky, formed not by stars, but by the dark patches between them, an inverse constellation made of shadow, not light. And it gets weirder. A fringe theory more poetic than proven suggests that the blinking of llamas during astronomical events was believed to mirror the blinking of celestial beings, that the gods didn't thunder or rage or smite. They blinked, slowly, rhythmically, watching the earth, judging its patterns. You step into the quiet of the stone chamber behind the slit. The air is still here, heavy and cool. On the floor is a faint carving, worn smooth by time, possibly a spiral, possibly a stylized eye. And you wonder, as you often have on this journey, if all these pieces are fragments of a story too slow to hear in a single lifetime. There's a legend from the Vilcabamba region about a star named Nawi, which only blinked once a year. If a llama blinked at the exact same moment, the crops would flourish. If not, well, better luck next season. Farmers would gather on these watch points at night, not just to scan the sky, but to watch the animals, to find sync, to find approval. You sit down on the cool stone and look through the slit. It's not night yet, just late afternoon. But you can imagine the stars lining up, ancient eyes peering through the gap, waiting for a signal from below. And somewhere beneath that same sky, a llama blinks once, slow and deliberate. The Incas believed in layers of existence, the world above Hanan Pacha, the world below Uku Pacha, and the world of the living K Pacha. These layers weren't distant. They interacted constantly. A bird flying overhead might carry a message from the upper world. A shadow falling across your path might be a whisper from below. And perhaps, in that sacred middle ground, stood the llama, earthbound, patient, quietly connecting both realms with its gaze. You step back into the open. The wind rising again, the sun is lower now, stretching your shadow long behind you. You walk forward, past the watch point, where the trail dips slightly into a hollow filled with low brush and scattered stones. Somewhere in this stretch is where a strange ceremony is said to have taken place. A ritual in which a group of astronomer priests attempted to record the stars' blinking patterns by watching llamas blink in sync with constellations. The idea, supposedly, was that each time a llama blinked under a specific star, a knot was tied into a special quipi. The result, a map not of the sky, but of the sky's rhythm. No physical evidence remains, no diagrams, just a few lines in an 18th century translation of an even older oral tale. But the image lingers. Llamas, blinking under stars, knots tied in silence, roads aligned not by geometry alone, but by permission, as if the very heavens were consulted before the next stone was laid. You descend slowly now, the trail softening beneath your feet. The sky has deepened, tinged with orange near the horizon. One last gust of wind brushes your shoulder like a farewell, and you glance up at the first stars beginning to peek through the dusk. They don't blink. Not really, but you do. The trail has begun to flatten now, dipping into a basin cradled by mountains on all sides like a giant, rocky palm. The sky above has gone full watercolor swirls of lavender and gold, bleeding into deeper purples. You feel it in your shoulders, in your breath, in your eyelids, a softness, a slowing. And then you see it, a cluster of stone seats, half sunken into the earth, forming a rough circle around a hollowed-out plaza. There are no signs, no tourist placards, just the faint outline of ceremonial intention. You step into the space, and it's quieter than it has any right to be. Even the wind seems to stop at the edge. This is what local stories call the Rock Alignment Council. According to one of the more theatrical versions of the tale, this was the very spot where Inca architects, masons, priests, and a particularly fussy llama convened to determine the ideal pacing for a long stretch of road to the coast. And here's where things get delightfully ridiculous. The dispute wasn't over the materials, the route, or even the terrain. It was about whether to base the stone placement on the blink rate of the royal llama or the more traditional sun shadow method. You sit on one of the time-worn seats and look across the empty plaza. It's not hard to imagine the scene. One elder, robes flapping in the wind, arms crossed, another gesturing wildly with a knotted cord in hand, a priest murmuring about divine cycles, and in the middle of it all, the royal llama, chewing stoically, blinking precisely once every 4 seconds. The story goes that this debate lasted 9 days, and involved the drafting of multiple quipu to record arguments, counter-arguments, and at least 3 llama blink logs. A ceremonial runner was dispatched to fetch a second llama for comparison. By the time he returned, covered in dust and deeply unimpressed, the council had reached a compromise, alternate placement based on both blink rhythm and shadow lengths. Because nothing says compromise like synchronized masonry, historians still argue whether this council ever existed, or if it's an elaborate metaphor for the fusion of sacred and practical decision-making. Some believe the story is a dramatized version of a more mundane process, consultation between regional officials and local builders, with llamas simply present as pack animals. Others, especially in the more remote Quechua communities, insist that the story is based on truth, that the royal llama was real, that its blinks were logged like celestial events, that it was retired with full honors and buried with a ceremonial salt lick. You rise and walk to the center of the plaza. The stones here are embedded in spiraling patterns, slightly irregular but clearly intentional, not designed for walking, but for standing still, for circling, for consensus. There's something oddly comforting about the idea of a council of experts stopping everything just to watch a llama blink. In a world where decisions often move too fast, where planning skips right to execution, the idea of waiting, really, waiting for a natural rhythm to present itself feels revolutionary. You picture it again, the sun rising slowly, casting long, measured shadows across the plaza. The council seated, silent, a llama, perched regally on a stone slab, blinking with the calm of someone who knows they'll outlive your stress. And the builders, standing by with their tools, patiently waiting for the vote to be cast not by voice or decree, but by eyelid. This plaza, small as it is, begins to feel enormous the longer you stand in it, because what it represents isn't just one silly tale. It's the accumulated weight of a philosophy that prioritized harmony, not domination over nature, but collaboration with it, not brute efficiency, but timing, pacing, respect. Even for a woolly animal with questionable hygiene and an excellent poker face, you wander to the edge of the circle and find a set of low steps leading back to the road. The stones here are arranged in a distinct curve, not straight. Another hint that someone took the time to consider the flow of movement, not just its direction. It's said that after the council concluded, this stretch of road was built unusually quickly, as if the debate itself had created a kind of momentum. You feel that now? In your steps. Something easy, fluid, like your body has finally matched pace with the path beneath it. The wind returns, this time softer, lifting your hair and pushing at your back like encouragement. You walk again, and as you round the final edge of the plaza, you glance over your shoulder one last time. Nothing moves. Then, from behind a low wall, a llama head slowly rises. It blinks. Of course it does. The trail dips again, gently now, winding through a golden patch of grass that catches the last rays of sun, like it's been brushed with liquid honey. The air smells different here, drier. Doustier, tinged with faint wood smoke and distant eucalyptus. Below you, nestled between the folds of two hills, lies a colonial-era structure, stone walls, partially collapse, a red-tiled roof, slanted and stubborn. The edges blur into the surrounding ruin, as if history tried to erase it but gave up halfway through. You make your way down the slope, your feet crunching through grit and dry leaves. The building is still and silent, save for the creak of old timbers and the distant bray of a donkey pretending to be relevant. This, according to a few battered diaries and local folklore, was once the home of a Spanish cleric who tried unsuccessfully to document the so-called Llama blink cult of the Inca road builders. The records are hilariously confused. You peer inside through a sagging doorway. The floor is stone, uneven and cracked. A wooden beam stretches overhead like a tired brow. On one wall, graffiti modern, probably, but faint outlines of symbols linger, spirals, eyes, maybe even a llama or two. You step in cautiously, as if the floor might still remember colonial boots. The cleric's name was Father Domingo, a well-meaning man, if his letters are to be believed, but absolutely baffled by what he saw. One entry reads, "They pray not to their gods but to the woolen beasts. They place stones, then look at the animal. If it blinks, they cheer. If it does not, they stop." Historians still argue whether Father Domingo was witnessing a real construction method, a satire, or being lovingly gaslit by builders who had finally grown tired of explaining things to foreigners. Either way, his confusion is delightful. In another letter, he writes, "I have tried myself to judge the stones, yet no llama blinks for me. The heartbreak, the sheer drama." You walk further into the ruin. A section of the floor is carved in an attempt at a European-style chapel layout, but it sits awkwardly atop older Inca foundations. The result is a mismatched blend of geometry and intuition, like someone tried to teach a mountain how to do long division. You sit near what must have once been a writing desk. Maybe it was here that Father Domingo composed his reports by candlelight, muttering to himself about road rituals and blinking beasts. Somewhere nearby, a llama probably sat outside the window, chewing calmly, watching the priest unravel. There's something fitting about it. This strange collision of worldviews. The Spanish, with their books and certainties. The Incas, with their rhythms and sky maps and animals that seem to know more than they let on. One theory, long dismissed and then recently reconsidered, is that the Spanish misunderstood the role of llamas in Inca construction entirely. They assumed reverence where there was only rhythm. They mistook biological pacing for religious veneration, and in doing so, they wrote about it with equal parts frustration and awe. You dust off a flat stone near the back wall and find a faded carving, a spiral. Within a spiral, flanked by two small dots. Some interpret this as a solar motif. Others call it the blink glyph, supposedly marking the location of a llama that had once been so consistent in its blink timing. Builders returned year after year just to align new stones by it. You step outside, the light growing dim now. The building behind you seems to melt into the earth, reclaimed, forgiven. The trail continues, curving back toward the older, deeper parts of the road. As you walk, you feel the shift again from colonial memory to Inca presence. The stones change subtly, less regular, more alive. You reach a low wall where fragments of an older path re-emerge, half buried but unmistakable. The joins are perfect. The fit so snug you can't find the seam. And somewhere near your feet, a patch of grass moves. You freeze. A llama lifts its head from behind the wall, blinks slowly at you, and lowers it again. You have to laugh, not because it's funny though it is, but because the timing is just too perfect. You sit on the wall and let the last light settle around you. There's no sound but the faint rustle of leaves and the steady crunch of grass between llama teeth. The empire's long gone. The clerics are dust, but the road remains, and so does the rhythm. And whether by cosmic accident, practiced intuition, or centuries of stubborn woolly patience, that blink still lands at just the right moment. Right now, the stars come out slowly, like shy children peeking from behind the curtain of dusk. The path ahead is dusky gray, barely visible now except where the stones catch starlight and glow like old memories. You walk quieter, slower, not from fatigue, but from a sense of entering somewhere sacred, an older part of the road, untouched, unbothered, unhurried. Here, high above the valleys, the stones seem even more deliberate, as though this stretch was not built merely to reach a destination, but to be the destination. There's a story, half myth and half murmur, about this very place, a tale told by weavers and muleteers and great-uncles who lean too far into their stories after dusk. It says this final stretch of the Inca road was laid by the oldest builders, men and women who had built all their lives, who'd spent decades fitting stones, chasing shadow lines, timing their taps to blink and breath. When the empire began to crumble, they didn't flee. They stayed here, quietly finishing this road, one blink at a time. You stop and kneel beside one of the larger stones. It's massive, at least the size of the small cart, and yet it fits like it was poured into place. No chisel marks, no filler, just precision. Some fringe theorists, not many, just the brave or the sleep-deprived, claim this stretch of the road was so carefully paced that it somehow resonates with living things. They call it sympathetic engineering. The idea that the spacing of stones matches not only blink rhythms, but breath cycles, rest intervals, even dream patterns. You smirk. That's a bit much, even for this journey. Still, you sit down, just for a moment, and you notice something strange. Your own breathing starts to sync. Inhale on step yasi, exhale on pause. Blink every few seconds, just as your head tilts toward the sky. It's not magic. It's not science. It's just rhythm. Historians still argue whether this final section was ever completed. Some claim it's unfinished, that the final stones were never laid, that the road was abandoned when the Spaniards arrived. But if it was abandoned, no one told the stones. They sit here still placed, not waiting. You walk again, the wind soft now, brushing over your shoulders like a shawl. Ahead, a final curve in the trail brings you to a ledge, not a wall, not a gate, just a place where the road ends or maybe begins again. Somewhere down the mountain, you stand there quietly, looking out. Below you, the world lies still, hills cradled in shadow, rivers murmuring in their beds, and here and there, a pale dot of movement llamas, grazing in the dark, blinking in no particular hurry. You smile, because the truth is, nobody knows if the road builders timed their work to llama blinks. It could be myth, mistranslation, a joke that got wildly out of hand, or maybe just maybe it was true, a truth too slow to measure, too soft to write down, a rhythm carved into the land, not to be proven, but felt, and right now, you feel it. So you sit one last time, close your eyes, let the stars swirl overhead like ancient knots untangling. Let your breath slow. Let your blink fall into sync with stone and silence. Because somewhere far behind you, the road is still there, still standing, still blinking. You're still now. The road has faded behind your eyes, its curves and stones blurring into soft memory. The llamas are long gone, tucked into some highland fold of grass and shadow. Their blinks like closing parentheses on the day. Your breath slows. Each inhale draws in a little of that mountain stillness. Each exhale lets it go. The air is thinner here, not just in altitude, but in weight, lighter, like the world has set something down. The stone beneath you isn't cold anymore. It's just present. It holds you, like it's been waiting for you all this time, not with urgency, but with the same patience that laid every stone, one blink at a time. You begin to feel how the world moves without rushing. The wind doesn't race. The stars don't shout. Even time, in this moment, seems content to pause beside you. The stories you've heard tonight don't ask to be believed. They only ask to be remembered softly, to be carried like smooth pebbles in your pocket. Small, quiet things that shape the way you walk one blink at a time. So let your eyes close. Let your breath grow long. Let your thoughts flatten like the stones beneath your path. Nothing needs to happen right now. The road isn't going anywhere, and neither are you. You're here, and here is enough. Sleep well.